Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J vlog series. It's Sunday, August 10th, 2025, and on Sundays we talk about the purpose and meaning of life. And because it's August 10th, though, I have to give a shout out to one of my older brothers, Steve, who turns 70 today. That's right, born on August 10th, 1955, 70 years ago today. Happy birthday, Steve, and may the next 70 be even better. All right, so the theme this week for the Dr. J vlog series is positivity. All of the vlogs will tackle the subject from different angles. And so for starters, what do we mean by positivity? And how does that relate to the purpose and meaning of life? So first, as usual, let's tackle the definitional issue. So simply put, positivity refers to the quality of having a positive or an optimistic attitude. It's about looking at the brighter side of things, as in the old age expression, the power of positive thinking. And that's definitely part of the core of what we mean by positivity. And so we're going to be talking about that a lot this week. But in addition, though, positivity also refers to the presence of something rather than the absence of something, as in the presence of a substance, of a condition, a feature. And so that adds a whole other layer to what's implied by positivity. So think of a pregnancy test, right? You could test positive or negative for being pregnant. But here's the thing, your reaction to the test results could be quite the opposite of someone else's, as in a positive result. Wow, that's amazing. That's great. Or, a positive result. Oh my God, I'm pregnant. And trust me, I'd be shocked if I had a positive result in that regard. But you see the point. The obvious point being that sometimes we view the situation, the condition, the result, the substance, whatever it is, as a positive and sometimes as a negative. And therein lies the key to positivity. It's not just trying to maintain an optimistic attitude, although obviously that's important. Much like we'd like to try to be happy most of the time, as a general rule, rather than sad. But we're realistic. We know that we can't simply be happy all the time. We know that there are going to be challenges. There are going to be times when we're not necessarily happy. And I'd say the same thing about being positive, shall we say. Most of us would prefer to be positive in our outlooks rather than negative, or optimistic as we deal with life's challenges rather than pessimistic. But sometimes we find ourselves, of course, getting sucked into the vortex of negativity. We find ourselves confronted with bad news, perhaps, or perceived failures, from a bad test mark to losing one's job, from a car accident to a life-changing medical diagnosis. So we're going to examine these issues this week in an effort to reframe things in the spirit of positivity, because positivity clearly implicates a cognitive component as well. It's the first part of positivity, then, that refers to this notion of having a positive attitude or disposition in life. But it's the second part, and the parallel part, if you will, that refers to the presence or absence of some substance or condition. And it's the second part, in my view, that often trips us up. So imagine testing positive for COVID. Some of you have, many of you have perhaps, or at least maybe did a couple of years ago, or being HIV positive, or any number of medical conditions. And so our natural instinct then is to view that positive as a negative. How am I supposed to be positive when I've just been given such a negative diagnosis? How am I supposed to be positive when I've just lost my job and my income? How am I supposed to be positive when I've just lost my life partner or I've just lost a child? Those last examples, I honestly don't think I could maintain the veneer of positivity under those conditions, at least certainly not in the short term. And so these are the kinds of emotional gut punches that can really and even literally knock us out. And so it's a bit harder than just putting on a smiling face In fact, people would rightfully think we're nuts if we didn't have a deeply emotional and sad or painful reaction to losing a loved one. That's normal in our experiences. And I know for a fact that if that were to happen to me, if I were to lose my life partner, if I were to lose one of my children, I would every cell in my body would tighten up, and I'd feel like I was suffocating from the pressure under the weight of suddenly losing somebody that I love so much. And so I know, again, just speaking for myself, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, I'm just going to take a positive attitude towards it and get past it. It's not that simple. Okay. And so how does positivity then fit into this more complex life equation? Well, we're going to get to that, but it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some work this week to get there. So for today's vlog, rather, I just want to focus a bit more philosophically on the issue of positivity and talk in general terms about how it then ultimately does relate to the purpose and meaning of life. From my perspective, positivity ultimately defines life. The presence, rather than the absence, of organized energy that manifests itself at the cellular level, right up to the complex set of interconnected systems and organs, etc., that define plants and animals and human beings. So, in other words, I'm suggesting philosophically, if you will, that life, by definition, represents positivity, existence rather than non-existence, the presence of a condition rather than the absence. And I actually kind of know a little bit more about that, even from an experiential standpoint, than a lot of people. Not bragging, but it's just the reality of the situation. I know what it's like, if you will, to be here and now in this space and speaking, and I can affirm my existence by virtue of the fact that I woke up this morning and that I'm breathing and that I've had something to eat, and I start doing stuff, including making these little vlogs. But I also seen the other side. I've been clinically dead, at least for a few minutes, back in 2021. And I'd still be dead if I wasn't lucky enough then to have someone revive me, call 911, etc. You saw my first vlog in the series, you'll know a little bit more about the details of that story. But the point I want to reiterate here is simply that in my tiny little experience, I knew that I was dying, and I didn't know why at the time. I learned later that it was from a massive pulmonary embolism. Okay, but that's another issue. But the point is at that moment, I knew that I was dying. I didn't know why, and my last thought was one of frustration. I really didn't expect to just suddenly die today, right? This kind of sucks. That's exactly what I was thinking. I wasn't afraid. I was much more annoyed than anything else. And I was actually, and again, I've said this before, my last thought was, I can't believe I'm just going to randomly die now when I have so much more I want to do. That was my thought. I didn't attach a lot of negativity to it or fear, or like, in the sense of fear or, other emotional reactions. It was more of a cognitive one. And I know that's a bit selfish, by the way, on my part. In that last moment, I wasn't thinking about the impact of my death on my loved ones, for example. I was just thinking about it from my perspective. Oh, there's so much more I want to do. So I'm just being honest. That's what I was thinking at that moment. Okay. And then I was gone, dead. The absence of life. And I remember nothing of those few minutes while I was clinically dead. I describe it now as simply non-existence. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that I can truthfully or accurately or fully report on what happens when we die. Like everyone else, I don't really know, about the hereafter and so on. I'm not talking about it spiritually as such either. I'm only talking about my biological end of life. My brain doesn't recall or have any information of which I'm aware of what it's like to be dead. That's all I'm saying. But upon my return, I realized that there is a categorical difference between what my brain perceives as being alive versus being dead. And at least in the short term, I prefer the former. Okay, but here's the lesson, the key lesson for today. The positive state of being alive, the condition of being a conscious, living, breathing, sentient, and cognitive being is where it all starts, at least in terms of being a human being in this form on the planet. If you take away any of these things, the breathing, the feeling, the thinking, etc., then I'm no longer a human being. In fact, I'm no longer being. So whatever else you might think about your life and the purpose and the meaning thereof, by definition, you have to start with positivity in the second sense of the term. The presence of a certain substance or a condition or a form known as your physical self and your human life. That's a positive. That defines positivity. The fact that you exist right now, that you're going about your daily life, that you're even listening to my little vlog is a definitive example, or all definitive examples, of positivity. Your very existence then defines positivity. It may not always feel great, and we might at times, of course, feel deep pain and sorrow and negativity in our lives. But the fact that you can feel the pain is actually a positive. It's actually an affirmative statement about your existence. When you can no longer feel pain, then that implies an absence, a negativity. Does that make sense? I know it sounds strange, but so yes, we're starting with positivity this week because you are present. You exist. You are a living example of positivity. And because of that, this affords you and me and everyone else a chance, an opportunity to extend that positivity in creating a purposeful and meaningful life. And that's where the more conventional definition of positivity comes into play, as we'll continue to explore throughout the remainder of the week. But start with the one most definitive expression of positivity that you possess. You already possess, by definition. You exist. And if you go back to one of my earliest vlogs, you'll appreciate that your very existence is something of a miracle. You beat all kinds of statistical and environmental odds just to get here. And here you are. So you're already a winner in that sense. So what else are you going to do with your precious life? Stay tuned and we will continue our exploration of positivity throughout the remainder of the week. In the meantime, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. And maybe I'll see you tomorrow. That would be a positive thing. I hope to see you then. Take care.